Antipolo, DXKO Cagayan de Oro, DXKT Davao, DXKP Pagadian, DXXX Zamboanga, DXDX General Santos.
RPN Radio Philippines Network, DXKD Dipolo Radio Ronda, member kapisanan ng mga broadcaster ng Pilipinas.
The angel of the Lord declared unto Mary,
and she conceived by the Holy Spirit.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of death. Amen.
Behold the handmaid of the Lord.
Be it done to me according to your word.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of death. Amen.
And the Word was made flesh,
and dwelt amongst us.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of death. Amen.
Pray for us, O Holy Mother of God,
that we may be made worthy of the promises of Christ. Pour forth, we beseech you, O Lord, your grace into our hearts, that we, to whom the incarnation of Christ, your Son, was made known by the message of an angel, may by his passion and cross be brought to the glory of his resurrection, through the same Christ our Lord. Amen.
DXKD Dipolo Radio Ronda.
This is Newsnight, where we go above and beyond the headlines. I'm Pia Ontiveros. Tonight on the program, the Health Department widens its COVID-19 vaccination and booster coverage target as it detects nearly 1,000 more cases of Omicron subvariants. A major renovation of the session hall at the Batasang Pambansa, the first in 44 years, will welcome the President and members of the 19th Congress during the first State of the Nation address next week. And another milestone for Filipino pop group SB19. The group landed Teen Vogue's list of favorite boy bands of all time. The country logs more cases of Omicron subvariants. The health department says it detected 816 more cases of BA.5 subvariants in all regions except the Bangsa Moro. That is nearly 14 times more than it detected from the previous genome sequencing. Of this number, nearly 700 have been tagged as recovered, 78 are isolated, while 52 others are for verification. 12 returning Filipinos also tested positive for the subvariant. The DOH also listed nearly 100 others carrying other Omicron subvariants. But the agency still doesn't see COVID-19 cases peaking, even if it reported nearly 16,000 new cases in the past week. The DOH expects cases to go up until the end of the month, with more Omicron subvariants circulating, less compliance to health protocols, and waning vaccine immunity. Carolyn Bonkin reports that the administration targets to widen its booster vaccination coverage. Waning vaccine immunity. Carolyn Bonkin reports that the administration targets to widen its booster vaccination coverage.
Fully vaccinated a year ago, Joseph Rojas didn't plan to get a booster shot. He only got one in Manila on Wednesday because he needed it for his trip to Singapore.
Wala naman akong parang cause for concern. So parang wala akong nakikitang reason. As of now, bukod doon na magpa-booster.
He went with his father who also had his second dose last year.
Actually, wala na nga sa loob kung magpa-booster pa dahil mukhang okay na naman kasi meron na ako nung dalawa. Gusto ko lang meron akong parang backup, ika nga.
Ferdinand Gonzalez's son also got boosted.
Required sa school, not only to face-to-face classes but also for their health security.
Magdalena has also been long due for a booster, but finally got one when she passed by a vaccination site on her way to Quiapo.
Hindi ko talaga bala. Napadaan lang ako at magtatanong. Nagkataon, mayroon. Kaya tinuloy ko na kaysa para babalik pa ako uli.
Like most vaccination sites, this one in Cartilla ng Katipunan in Manila is getting fewer booster vaccinees. Most of those who come here take the additional dose if required for work or travel. The new administration is playing catch-up on slow booster uptake. Next Tuesday, a new vaccination campaign kicks off to fully vaccinate 90% of senior citizens and 50% booster coverage among 78 million Filipinos within the president's first 100 days in office. To do this, they need to go from the current 250,000 vaccinees weekly to over 397,000 people daily until early October. This time, there will be more regular vaccinations to where the people are, like schools, transport terminals, places of worship, and factories.
Senior citizens, we can find them, most of them, at home. Hirap, lumabas, we go to them. Children will go to school already, so let's set it up there. Baka mas ma-encourage natin ang mga bata at mga nanay nila na magpabakuna. Even the teachers who are not yet vaccinated.
Perks of getting boosted and disadvantages of those who don't have one are still being discussed. But if the government reaches its target vaccine coverage, Health Officer in charge Vergeres says the president is looking at making wearing a face mask optional outdoors.
If we reach that 50% booster coverage, we have enough confidence that the wall of immunity will be there. Ang unang-unang sinabi ng presidente, baka sakasakaling pag-aralan na natin na pwedeng yung mask outside spaces ay maari nang maging voluntary na lang.
Without enough data to back its safety and efficacy, health officials can't yet endorse a second booster shot for the general population. But they are asking the Food and Drug Administration to study the second booster shot for age 50 to 59 based on studies done abroad. Caroline Bogkin, CNN Philippines.
Omicron offshoot BA.5 is dominating COVID-19 cases in the United States. 78% of new infections across the U.S. last week were positive for the subvariant. Health officials say that is up from 69% the week before. The spread of BA.5 is causing a wave of breakthrough infections and reinfections in the U.S., with hospitals seeing an increase in admissions and even deaths. The U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention has recommended a fourth vaccine brand, Novavax, carrying different immunity against more infectious variants. More than 1 million families are said to be delisted from the government's conditional cash transfer program as they are no longer considered poor. Details from Melissa Lopez.
The Social Welfare Department cleans up its Pantawid Pamilyang Pilipino program or 4Ps to remove 1.3 million families from its list of beneficiaries. The change will affect nearly a third of the 4.4 million families by September or October. The agency says it's for a good cause.
Abay, kung graduate na ho yung mga anak ko nila, di ho ba? May trabaho na ho sila, medyo malaki na ho kinikita. Yung mga anak nila na sa OFWs na ho, natutulungan na ho sila, inaalis na ho natin para yung kanila pong pwesto na yun, ibigay naman natin doon sa mga wala pong natatanggap at all. Wala pa pong yung kahit isang tuka o yung isang beses lang isang araw kumain.
The news concerns Cristina Ricabar, a 4-piece recipient with 2 kids in high school. She owns a sari-sari store in Barangay San Vicente in Quezon City. She continues to receive 4,600 pesos every 2 months from the program.
Malaking tulong talaga sa amin yun. Kasi kahit pa paano, para sa mga anak ko, sa pag-aaral nila. Sana kung gano'n na may tatanggalin, imbestigahan nila na para at least valid reason talaga na matanggal ka.
Poor families get 1,600 up to 3,400 pesos monthly, provided they send their children to school and bring them to health facilities for checkup and vaccination. Jelly Gasga was a 4-piece beneficiary for 5 years until DSWD stopped releasing her monthly aid of 2,000 after her youngest turned 19.
Sa 2,000 na yun, yung 1,000 ilalaan ko sa pamasahe niya. Yung 1,000 pagkain, vitamins.
Secretary Erwin Tulfo says a family can only be a 4-piece member for up to 7 years. He adds another 600,000 households may be delisted as field officers cannot locate them or they are refusing interviews. DSWD is identifying a new set of 1.3 million families to replace 4-piece graduates from 15 million poor families.
Siguro okay lang, pero sa panahon ngayon, kung ako ang tatanungin, medyo mahirap pa kasi siyempre yung napagdaanan natin.
4-piece beneficiaries know the cash aid cannot be forever, but they hope it can be sustained at a time of high prices and a continuing pandemic. Melissa Lopez, CNN Philippines.
Hybrid learning can still be held in very specific areas. President Bongbong Marcos said this during his meeting with education officials on Tuesday. Although Mr. Marcos, as quoted by Malacanang, still prefers a full shift to in-person classes by November, he instructed the Education Department to prepare learning devices and other supplies that may be needed for blended learning. The statement did not give details on what will merit the shift to online classes. In a separate statement, Vice President and Education Secretary Sara Duterte says the department will prepare a plan on institutionalizing blended learning under special circumstances. Duterte previously gave strict orders for the mandatory face-to-face classes beginning November 2nd. She says that requirement is still in effect. The group Teachers Dignity Coalition welcomes this development but hopes the government will consider moving the opening of the school year to mid-September to, quote, further study the situation, prepare the field, and implement the existing rules on teachers' rest, unquote. A former labor official has been named new Director General of the Technical Education and Skills Development Authority, or TESDA. Press Secretary Trixie Cruz Angeles confirming the appointment of Danilo Cruz. He was former Labor Undersecretary for Employment and Manpower. Bowling legend Bong Ku now heads the Philippine Sports Commission. The bemedaled sports icon was former president of the Philippine Bowling Federation. The top positions at the Departments of Health, Science and Technology and Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development have yet to be filled nearly 3 weeks since Mr. Marcos took office. Up next on Newsnight, the President's first State of the Nation address happening in 5 days. CNR Cantel walks us through preparations at the Batasang Pambansa Live. And this Filipino boy group is always ready to take to greater heights. Find out what SB19 achieved this time. Stay tuned.
Conquering the universe was the ultimate. There's more. Dahil tinawag ho ako ng Panginoon for a major purpose. To guide the youth, help communities, and to bring others closer to Him. Kaya I take care of my health through proper diet, exercise, and MX3 capsule. I am ready to serve. Kasi para sa Panginoon, hindi lang ako 4th runner-up. First place ako sa puso niya.
Mahalagang paalala, ang MX3 capsule ay hindi gamot at hindi dapat gamitin panggamot sa anumang uri ng sakit.
Fried chicken? Timplang happy! With easy-to-cook Magnolia Chicken Timplados. Iba't ibang sarap ng chicken, kaya. Anong Magnolia Chicken Timplados mo? Iba't ibang easy chicken sarap.
Baby, I'm home! Happy ako kapag listo at ganado siyang kumain. Happy and healthy siya sa Nutri-Chunks. Recommended by my vet. Nutri-Chunks is the only one with active boost and prebiotics na pampalisto. Made with real meat and fortified pa with essential nutrients that help keep him strong, healthy, and happy. Listo ganado sa Nutri-Chunks.
You're watching CNN Philippines. It is all systems go for the first State of the Nation address of President Marcos at the Batasang Pambansa in Quezon City on July 25th. A fully renovated session hall will welcome the President and members of the 19th Congress, the first renovation in 44 years after it was built by the President's late father, former President Ferdinand Edralin Marcos. Cian Arcangel takes us to Batasan for details. Cian?
Pia, a full house is expected at the session hall on Monday when President Bongbong Marcos delivers his first State of the Nation address. Over 1,300 invitations have already been sent out to guests, which include foreign dignitaries and government officials. Former Presidents Joseph Estrada and Gloria Macapagal Arroyo have confirmed their attendance, while yet to say yes to the invitation are ex-Presidents Fidel Ramos and Rodrigo Duterte, as well as former Vice President Leni Robredo.
Systems go na tayo. Nag-out na rin tayo ng mga invitations. Ang gusto ng Malacanang, actually Pangulo, is maging simple lang, simple at very more non-traditional ng SONA.
Renovation of the session hall is completed in time for the Marcos Sona at a price tag of over 100 million pesos. Additional lights have also been installed to make the hall brighter, while the flat flooring is now converted into steps to accommodate additional seats for lawmakers. There are now automatic sliding doors at the main entrance to the hall. All guests who will watch the Sona inside the plenary hall should present a negative RT-PCR test result before being allowed entry.
As much as possible, first come first serve yung mga makakaupo dun sa yung mga former member na pwedeng gusto mo po, makakaupo sila doon. Pero the rest, sa gallery na sila makakaupo.
Starting Friday, Batasang Pambansa will be on total lockdown, and on July 25, it will be a no-fly zone. Signal jammers will be activated just before the President's arrival. The SONA will be directed by Director Paul Soriano. Back to you, Pia.
Cian, what do we know about the program?
Pia, so far the details are coming in trickles from the House Secretariat. What we know so far is that a choir from Ilocos Norte will be singing the Philippine National Anthem on the day of the State of the Nation address. There are also no other information provided as to the caterer and the food that will be served to the guests after the SONA, but the House Secretary General said that there will be cocktails after the event. Pia?
Cian Arcangel there reporting from Quezon City. The Presidential Security Group in final stages of preparations for Mr. Marcos' SONA. PSG Commandant Colonel Ramon Zagala says they're making necessary coordination with other security agencies, including the police and the armed forces. Zagala says they're making sure everything will run smoothly on Monday.
We assure you that we will deploy enough personnel to protect the President, the First Family, and all those attending. As you know, it is not just the President attending the SONA. There will be members of the House of Representatives, the Senate, and other guests that will be attending, which will be part of the protection that PSG will give during the SONA.
A different scene will take place outside the Batasan on Monday. Militant groups are taking to the streets to demand action from the Marcos administration on issues affecting millions of Filipinos. Chrissy Di Matulak reports.
Militant groups will be pushing through the tradition of holding protest actions during the State of the Nation address. This year will be no exception, especially with President Bongbong Marcos set to deliver his first SONA. According to the group Bayan, they are unperturbed with the authorities' call for a no-rally zone along Commonwealth Avenue. Secretary General Renato Reyes says they plan to hold a protest along Batasan Road, their usual venue during the President's address.
We're not going to go to President Memorial Circle. Hindi namin option yun. Hindi rin option yung CHR kasi masyadong maliit. In 2016 and 2017, we were able to hold the SONA rallies along Batasan Road. And for the last 6 years, there have been no untoward incidents.
Less than a week before the SONA, authorities deemed Commonwealth Avenue a no-rally zone, saying protesters, whether pro or anti-government, are only allowed to gather in freedom parks, such as the UP grounds and Quezon Memorial Circle. The Philippine National Police clarified that if rallyists are able to secure a permit from the local government unit, they can hold actions even along Commonwealth.
As long as they will be issued permit po at nakalagay po doon yung time and manner and place po nung pinayagan po na area ay pagbibigyan naman po ng PNP po yun.
Police said they will be implementing the appropriate response when needed.
Magkakaroon po ng sakitan, definitely po ay hindi po maiiwasan na magkaroon po ng arrest dyan. At may mga naka-standby po tayo ng mga bus po ng BGNP na kung saan po pwede po natin dalhin po doon sakasakaling may maaresto. Pero this time, ma'am, patuloy po kaming umaapil sa mga grupo po na magpoprotesta na wag na po sana tayong humantong sa ganong sakitan.
The usual practice of burning effigies is discouraged this year, in line with the adherence to minimum health standards. They say this is to avoid the gathering of massive crowds at a specific area. Bayan says they are currently coordinating with the Quezon City local government in order to secure a permit. Chrissy de Matulak, CNN Philippines.
What can we expect during President Marcos's first sauna? A glimpse of some traditions and rituals in this first of a three-part sauna series. Another year, another State of the Nation address. Only this time, it's a new administration, a new president. But it's not just any new president. He's a Marcos, something the forces that ousted his father 36 years ago never saw coming. A wild pendulum swing, a 180-degree turnaround from 1986 to 2022. So now we can't use the term post-Marcos to describe every Congress since 1986 because, well, it doesn't apply anymore. Because Ferdinand Romualdez Marcos Jr. is president and he's delivering his first sauna on July 25th.
Ladies and gentlemen, honorable members of Congress, the President of the Republic of the Philippines, President Rodrigo Roa Duterte.
Which, as tradition and ritual dictate, go by clockwork. A State of the Nation address is delivered every single year, every fourth Monday of July, in the plenary hall of this Batasang Pambansa. Shortly before 4 in the afternoon, the President disembarks from a chopper and is welcomed by the Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces and the Sergeants at Arms of both the Senate and House of Representatives. This welcome symbolizes the fact that the executive and legislative are co-equal branches of government. AFP Chief of Staff General Andres Centino, appointed by former President Duterte and extended by President Marcos, escorts the President through an honor guard for arrival honors. Waiting at the end of that honor guard formation will be the Senate President, Juan Miguel Zubiri, and the Speaker of the House, Martin Romualdez, the President's first cousin on his mother's side. There was a Speaker Daniel Romualdez, Imelda's uncle, from 1957 to 1962, 3 years before Marcos Sr. became president. So as the president enters the Batasan, he's brought first to a holding room to wait for the appointed time.
Rodrigo Roa Duterte.
And when that appointed time comes, he's led to the session hall where he makes his entrance. Now that pandemic restrictions have eased up a bit, the sauna red carpet fashion show may be back to a certain extent, so the plenary hall will be filled with an extremely well-dressed crowd. By the time the President ascends the rostrum, the joint session will already have been called to order with a bang of 2 gables and the mounting of the Senate and House maces on their holders. The only other 2 times when Congress is in joint session is when it convenes as the National Board of Canvassers to canvass the votes cast for President and Vice President as it did in May. And when it considers martial law as it did in July 2017 when it extended martial law in Mindanao because of the siege of Marawi City. Part 2 of the Sauna 2022 series tomorrow here on Newsnight. We'll also bring you the first sauna of the 17th President Bongbong Marcos as it happens on Monday, July 25th from 2 p.m. onwards at the Batasang Pambansa in Quezon City. Catch live pictures of the opening of the 19th Congress at 9:30 a.m. only here on CNN Philippines. Siblings, Senators Pia and Alan Peter Cayetano have yet to decide whether they will join the majority or minority blocs in the 19th Congress. Alan Peter says forming an independent bloc is one of their options if they fail to reach an agreement with either presumptive Senate President Mig Zubiri and or Senator Coco Pimentel. Pimentel is looking to become the minority leader. The siblings want to make sure that the so-called supermajority will be independent while they fear conflict in the race for the minority leadership.
Kung magma-minority, 4 kami, baka magtuol sa minority leader. And as I said, ayoko naman makipag-agawan. So, kung makipag-usap sila and they want me to lead the minority or they want Senator Pia, then pwedeng pag-usapan. Pero kung mag-aagawang kami, pwede naman kami mag-independent. If Senator Risa and Senator Coco would want me to lead the minority, because I did that during Pinoy's time and then I was a former speaker, I don't think I'll say no to them.
In a text message to CNN Philippines, Pimentel said the Cayetanos are welcome to join minority and they will just have to settle the leadership issue among themselves. In other news, the Foreign Affairs Department looking to repatriate over 100 Filipino nationals in Sri Lanka soon as the South Asian nation grapples with economic and political unrest. Foreign Affairs Undersecretary Eduardo de Vega says 115 Filipinos want to go home, but he says it's difficult to arrange a repatriation flight because of Sri Lanka's administrative requirements. He adds the government is looking to fund commercial flight tickets of returning Filipinos.
Certainly, ang gusto namin, bago matapos ang buwan ng Agosto, lahat ng nakauwi na gustong umuwi, nakauwi na. So, in the next few weeks, mag-umpisa na yan umuwi.
The government also working to provide financial assistance to Filipinos staying in Sri Lanka, but De Vega says bringing money to the country is also difficult because of regulations on inflation. Around 700 Filipinos are living and working in that embattled country. Well, a move likely to anger protesters still in Sri Lanka, with lawmakers electing the embattled former prime minister as president. Ranil Wickremesinghe, out of 223 votes from Parliament Wednesday, Wickremesinghe sat as acting president after the former top official fled Sri Lanka and eventually resigned. Scenes of devastation in China, with the nation suffering from extreme weather emergencies. Towns and farmlands have been washed away by severe floods as COVID-19 health workers collapse from the scorching heat. Millions in landslides in China since May. And in the United States, excessive heat alerts have been raised over 20 states. This means more than 100 million people, or 1/3 of the American population, are facing a dangerous heat wave. Forecasters project dozens of record-high temperatures across the southern U.S. Wednesday. Straight ahead on Newsnight, the head coach of Gilas Pilipinas says sorry to Filipinos after yesterday's devastating loss to Japan. And a sigh of relief from Pinoy fans of Justin Bieber with his Manila concert officially pushing through. More after the break.
It can be dangerous out there. Buti na lang, there's locally super fruits with 3 kinds of fruits that are super.
Prebiotics that aid digestion. Second, there's her passion fruit drink with no added sugar and high in vitamin C. Lastly, we have our mangosteen drink, good for your heart. All superfruits contain more antioxidants than your average fruit to help protect your immune system. Superfruit for super you.
Jollibee Cloud is amazing. It's very convenient to use. It's like bringing our office trunk line anywhere. No missed opportunities. Savings? Oh yeah. It's safe and secure.
Malaking bagay yung mga farm to market road, tulad ng mga expressways natin. Kasi pag humahango ka ng di-deliver, mapapabilis yung deliver niya. Konti yung expenses, makakatipid. Kami, isda yung business namin. Kailangan namin yung expressway para on time yung deliver sa market ng product namin.
Our expressways provide faster access to local agriculture and livestock suppliers.
Expressways, road infrastructure plays a very significant role in accelerating agricultural production. It is one of the key components for development, as it promotes access to economic and social services, generating increased agricultural income and productive employment.
Welcome back to CNN Philippines Newsnight. A correction first on our story on Bong Ku with the Philippine Sports Commission. She's going to be a commissioner and she will not head it. Now, meantime, let's go on to other sports stories. It is the end of the road for Gilas Pilipinas in the FIBA Asia Cup in Indonesia after finishing in 9th place. The national men's basketball team bowed to Japan in a knockout game last night, 102-81. It was Japan's first win against the Philippines in 12 years. Gilas head coach Chot Reyes apologizing for disappointing, quote, a lot of our countrymen. But he said the tournament exposed the team to a new level of play.
We brought a very young team here, and the experience is just going to make them better.
For the FIBA World Cup Asia qualifiers, Gilas may be getting help from a Filipino-American NBA star. In an exclusive interview with Plate Right TV, Reyes says Jordan Clarkson, a former NBA Sixth Man of the Year, is expected to join the team next month for games on the 25th and the 29th. Updates on local concerts now. Great news for Believers. All is set for Justin Bieber's show in Manila. Ovation Productions confirms the American pop star is resuming his Justice World Tour after postponing shows last month in Canada and the US because of health issues. Justin previously posted a video showing that he was unable to move half of his face because of Ramsay-Hunt syndrome. Bieber is holding a concert at the CCP Open Grounds on October 29. And fans of Jessie, get ready to zoom in at the Mall of Asia Arena in Pasay City. The K-pop rapper will perform there on September 30th. Pre-selling for tickets is set on July 31st, while the official sale begins the next day. Alongside the likes of BTS and the Beatles, P-pop sensation SB19 was named one of Teen Vogue's 33 favorite boy bands of all time. The Lifestyle magazine writes the five-member act, quote, continued achieving heights of popularity in early 2022 with the release of their hit Bazinga. And that is it for now. Join me again on news.ph at 7 p.m. and on Politics as Usual at 8. I'm Pio Ontiveros for Newsnight, where we go above and beyond the headlines.
Network, DXTV, Dipolo, Radio Ronda.
The body has its own way of healing. When you injure your cartilage, the tough, slippery tissue that covers the ends of bones where they form a joint, the body repairs the damage by creating a new bone in the area. Now these lumps are what we call bone spurs. In this episode, we'll take a closer look at what bone spurs are and how they affect the body. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and this is MedTalk Health Talk on CNN Philippines. Our guests are here today to guide us on what are bone spurs. With us is Dr. Mikhail Louver. He's an orthopedic surgeon at St. Luke's Global City and assistant professor at St. Luke's College of Medicine. Also with us is Dr. Franklin Domingo. He's a rehabilitation medicine specialist from the Asian Hospital and Medical Center. Bone spurs, a lot of our viewers who hear of bone spurs, its medical term is osteophytes. I'll start the conversation with Dr. Miko. When we talk about osteophytes or bone spurs, what exactly are these? What are we talking about here?
They are essentially a reaction of bone whenever they come into contact with each other. So it is most commonly seen in the most common condition, which is osteoarthritis.
Dr. Frank, what are the more common ways for a person to know that they have osteophytes or bone spurs?
Patients come to us in our clinic, they often even don't have an idea about what bone spurs are. But then when they come in because of neck pain, back pain, heel pain, knee pain, or hip pain, we ask for an x-ray, and invariably a result will come out, and they begin to ask, is this the cause of the pain, or is this something that's just incidental? Is it a pain generator? So that's how we usually encounter the patients who complain of bone spurs.
Now, I'd like to ask Dr. Miko naman, when they come in for pain, what are the more typical parts of the body would someone feel these osteophytes or these bone spurs? Where do they usually come out?
Essentially, if you look at epidemiology or numbers, it is actually on the knees, which is the most common area where these patients would come in for pain. Next would be the feet, the hands, and then the back as well.
Dr. Miko, you mentioned about the knees, the feet, and whatnot. They come in for pain. Let's talk about the character of the pain that someone would usually feel when they do have a bone spur. Is something significant with the pain? Could you describe the kind of pain that a bone spur would elicit?
Bone spur pain would give out some form of localized or direct pain on that part of the body. Where it is the knee, then the pain would be localized on that knee region or somewhere close to it. There's also a concept that we call it radiates somewhere close to that area. So essentially, it is pain. It's like point tenderness pain. Whenever you point to that region, that is where it's most painful at, then most likely it is because of consequence of the bone spurs.
Now, Dr. Frank, let's talk about that a little bit. Could you expound a little bit more on how bone spurs occur in the process of repair?
Yeah, it's your body's failed attempt at trying to repair damage that has been caused through wear and tear. Most specifically in patients with arthritis, and it usually happens in joints where we have a lot of loading. So when damage occurs in these joints because of injuries, overuse, or just simply wear and tear, it's the body's own way of trying to heal itself, but invariably it just doesn't work out the right way, and we have bone spurs, and when they touch on nerves that are sometimes around these structures, they invariably cause pain.
Now, apart from repairing injuries to our bones and joints, are there other causes of bone spurs, Dr. Miko?
It usually comes into play with regards to medical conditions. So these come into play with some conditions like rheumatoid arthritis. These come into play with gout or gouty arthritis. And these are more of the medical arthropathies or medical joint pains that we also see in clinic.
Dr. Miko, are there certain people who are more at risk of developing bone spurs? I hear a recurrent term here is osteoarthritis. So are there certain age groups who are more at risk of getting bone spurs?
The most common age group, it's actually the middle age to the elderly age group. There's actually a study done in PGH wherein they essentially mapped it out somewhere around 60 years old, where these patients would come into your clinic complaining of the joint pain. One of the biggest factors as well that you could commonly see in medical literature is that these patients who develop these joint pains outside of the age parameter or the degenerative problem, especially when they come into play, when they come into you at an early onset of an age, then we have to think about some form of genetic or medical problem that would lead to these bone spurs.
Now, Dr. Frank, is it sort of inevitable for the elderly or those advancing in age to have bone spurs? And if that is the case, are these relieved or not relieved for that matter with your common pain relievers such as those like non-steroidal anti-inflammatories?
Bone spurs are much like taxes, as some other doctors would say. They're like taxes in death. They're unavoidable. They just happen. And as with regards to the treatment, when using non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, they would probably just relieve you of the pain. But is it addressing the root cause of the pain? I don't think so.
Can diet do anything with osteophytes or bone spurs for that matter? A lot of our viewers try to prevent this by eating healthy, taking calcium supplements and whatnot. Will these do anything in trying to prevent osteophytes from happening?
I think they will. They will help. Especially studies now have come out that a Mediterranean diet, which is high in olive oil, green leafy vegetables, different colors of fruits, I think diet may play a good part. Supplements, I'm not so sure if there are any supplements that could alleviate the symptoms or the progression. Although they did have some studies that have come out that a deficiency in certain vitamins like vitamin B, vitamin E, and sometimes even vitamin K have an increased occurrence of bone spurs in some patients.
Dr. Miko, before we go into break, can bone spurs occur because of the way certain people have handled their skeletal structure during their younger years? High-impact sports, carrying increased weight on their joints for that matter, ill-fitting shoes, all of these factors, can these contribute to having osteophytes or bone spurs?
Whatever the person has done onto their earlier parts of their lives, essentially it adds to the load on the joint. And then as we know that these bone spurs are a natural reaction to these overloading issues, then in a way it takes a chip daily into your joint longevity. Weight management together with exercise is the easiest way in terms of trying to prevent the progression of these bone spurs.
When we return, we'll discuss how bone spurs can be signs of a more serious problem in your body. We'll be right back here on Med Talk Health Talk. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez and welcome back to Med Talk Health Talk, where caring is our calling. Now earlier we discussed what bone spurs are and what causes it. Now we'll discuss what other health conditions it may be connected to. Arthritis is the swelling and tenderness of one or more of your joints. Now the most common type is osteoarthritis. Now osteoarthritis causes cartilage to break down, and as we've mentioned earlier, the body repairs the damage by growing bone spurs. Now, Dr. Miko, let's talk a little bit about connection of arthritis and that of osteophytes or bone spurs. Is one dependent on the other?
Essentially, it is a cause and effect. So whenever these joints are overloaded, the cartilage begins to get damaged. And when these joints get damaged, the body's natural reaction is to try to stabilize or prevent or decrease the pain. And the only way for the bone to hold on to these structures is to produce more bone.
Dr. Frank, do we see the increased occurrence of bone spurs when the arthritis begins as well?
Yes, that's something which we can expect. As arthritis progresses, the amount of bone spurs that we see in patients' x-rays or in CT scans or in MRIs, we also see that they increase. Again, it's your body's way of trying to heal itself, but it's just not doing the right job. So that we have bone spurs and we have pain.
Now, Dr. Miko, given that bone spurs can be a result of arthritis, how do we lessen the risks? Is there a way for us to lessen the risks of arthritis, of developing arthritis to begin with?
Yes, there are ways, modifiable ways that we can do to prevent these progression, to prevent the disease progression. And it is one of the easiest ways to do this is through proper weight management and through good exercise. Exercise is actually a very good way to strengthen the musculatures around that joint region. And once we get these good muscles around these regions, then essentially it is a way of unloading the joint.
Dr. Miko, could you give some exercises for the viewers that are not hard on the joints, that are not high impact, but at the same time effective in addressing and trying to prevent arthritis and therefore bone spurs?
It's actually quite a tricky question because it depends mostly on the affected joint. But in terms of trying to look at it as an overview, we all have to remember that it is basically trying to unload the joint. And I think for me personally, one of the best and easiest exercises or sports that a person can do is through swimming. And swimming, there's actually a specialized form of therapy called aquatherapy that can help with these offloading activities for the joint. And not only does it offload you whenever you're submerged into water, it's because of the resistance of the water, it adds more, in a way, strengthening to the muscles around that joint affected.
Dr. Frank, let's talk about that since it's in your line of expertise when it comes to trying to get those joints moving but at the same time protecting them. One good activity is that of swimming. Is there any other activity, or how can our viewers maximize these activities in order to enhance their health, their overall bone health for that matter?
Swimming is probably the best thing that you can do because of the effect of buoyancy. As you know, buoyancy is there to take off the weight and stress off the knee joints and your hip joints and some of the joints on your back. But something more practical would probably be walking. It's the easiest thing you can do. Very simple. You don't even need a trainer. You don't even need a swimming pool. Simply walking to the best of your ability. A brisk walk would be nice. A brisk walk to a 90-year-old might be very different to a brisk walk for a 50-year-old. But trying to walk and trying to exercise, that's just one way of doing it. And another exercise, of course, is cycling because, of course, the seat that you're sitting on, of course, takes off a big chunk of that weight. And what are the things that we should avoid? Definitely high-impact activities like jogging, running, maybe playing tennis, playing basketball, anything at all that puts a lot of weight on that joint, we try to avoid that.
Now, we've been talking about ways to prevent it. Let's talk about therapies done for someone who is diagnosed with that of a bone spur. Dr. Miko, let's talk about someone who has a diagnosis of bone spur. First of all, is it easy to spot an osteophyte, Dr. Miko?
Yes, it is actually quite easy. A simple x-ray can essentially showcase where these bone spurs are located and how large they are.
So, Dr. Miko, once someone is properly diagnosed to have osteophytes or bone spur, what is the usual next line of therapy?
In terms of sequencing for therapy, whenever patients come into our clinic, it's because mainly of pain. And as doctors, we really need to address the pain first and foremost. So the usual course is essentially to start patients on a short course of non-steroidal anti-inflammatories. And also one favorite thing that I give to patients, which is quite effective, is like your ordinary paracetamol. A majority of these cases are in the mild to, essentially they are in the mild to at least a less moderate form of osteoarthritis or bone spur formation. And these can be readily treated by these medications.
Now, Dr. Miko, I noticed your first line of treatment was not surgery. Now, my question is, a lot of people say, I have a bone spur. Dr. Miko, why don't you just surgically operate that, get that out, and I'll be on my way? Why is surgery not the first line of treatment when it comes to not just bone spurs, but for a lot of diseases, actually?
To be honest, bone spurs, they don't actually cause too much of a pain, especially in the earlier stages wherein these problems start to develop. They actually become more bothersome and nuisance in terms of symptoms when they get to progress into the moderate to severe stage. So definitely surgery is basically our last resort in terms of treatment. And we always try to focus on the conservative treatment options or the non-operative treatment options in treating these bone spur problems.
That being said, when we return, we'll explore the options you can take to lessen the symptoms of getting bone spurs. You're watching Med Talk Health Talk. We'll be right back. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and this is Med Talk Health Talk, your partner in healthcare. Now that we know what bone spurs are and how they are diagnosed properly, let's discuss how different forms of treatment are and how they are there to prevent bone spurs from causing you more trouble. Dr. Frank, let's talk about some of the therapies involved when someone is diagnosed with having a bone spur. Depending on where they are, let's talk about the more common one on the knees and the feet. What type of therapy are patients expected to have when they are under your care?
What we can try to do is we can try to give modalities to decrease the pain. We could use heat, we could use cold, we could use transcutaneous electrical nerve stimulation. There are newer modalities right now such as shockwave therapy, which may actually help to alleviate the symptoms of pain. But more importantly would be exercise, especially the vastus medialis oblique, or it's part of the quadriceps group of muscles, which is involved basically in stabilizing the knee. So we need to do that.
When it comes to a timeline or a time frame where the patient can feel some relief from the pain, I know it varies from patient to patient, but on average, what kind of time frame are we looking at before they can actually feel better and the pain is much less?
We can usually feel some pain relief by starting the medications. So giving a short course of pain medications would be helpful while waiting for the longer-term effect of rehab to come in. So while we're decreasing the medications, we're actually going up on the strengthening exercises, and that would probably alleviate the symptoms of the patient, not only in the short term, but also in the long term.
Now, Dr. Miko, can a bone spur resorb on its own? Meaning after good therapy, losing weight, and all this stuff, can the bone spur or the osteophyte resolve on its own, become normal on its own?
The short answer is no. Whenever these osteophytes start to form, they are basically permanent structures, and the only thing that we could do in terms of trying to grab onto these like bone spurs is to prevent the progression or further production of more bone spurs.
Now, Dr. Miko, let's talk about surgery for a second here. When is surgery an option for someone who is diagnosed with osteophytes?
It is always the last option that we take in terms of trying to control the pain. These patients would generally have the severe form of osteoarthritis wherein their joint space is completely eroded, and you can see that essentially whatever these positions come into, it's causing pain, whether at rest, whether while sitting. It's essentially a constant type of pain, and that's usually the tipping point in terms of trying to move forward into surgical management for these cases.
Now, Dr. Frank, when it comes to supplements, a lot of our viewers are really keen on this because there's so many on the market. You have chondroitin, you have collagen, you have calcium and all this. When it comes to osteophytes or bone spurs, could you give the truth of the matter? Is it effective? Is it best left alone?
There is no direct evidence linking the use of supplements such as chondroitin or glucosamine sulfate and calcium as to the progression of bone spurs.
Before we go, do you have any words of advice for our viewers, Dr. Miko?
My take with regards to these problems, it's actually more of a proactive prevention. Rather than we let these bone spurs progress, it's actually quite important that we try to maintain our body physique in terms of controlling the weight and also exercise. I've been seeing a lot of patients who, because of this pandemic, has significantly gone down in terms of physical activity. And I think in terms of moving forward and treatment of these problems, it's more going to be concentrated and should always be concentrated on prevention.
And Dr. Frank, your advice for our viewers?
Yes, and like death and taxes, bone spurs may be unavoidable, but then there are certainly so many things that we can do to control the pain. And the sooner that they see their rehab doctor, their orthopedic doctor, their rheumatologist, or any other doctor, the better we can treat them.
And with that, thank you very much, Dr. Mikhail Louver and Dr. Franklin Domingo for being with us today. You definitely shared a lot of useful information for our viewers about osteophytes or bone spurs. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and thank you for watching Med Talk Health Talk. We'll see you again next time.